Analytics workstream call. This call is being recorded. This is our second call of the series. It used to be our CTSA architecture call. We are using this time to discuss more broadly.
As possible, because we want to be able to ask for it. You
Peter,
know,
I can hear you in the background.
It
Peter?
feels like there's somebody not on mute. If you guys are not speaking, if you guys can mute yourself, that'd be great. So we have a pretty packed agenda, so I'm going to turn it over to Justin Ganay. Justin, do you want to take it over? And if you want me to pull up the slides, I'm happy to do that.
Probably just easier if I present. Let me go ahead and do that.
Sure. You want to present?
Yeah.
All right. Let me stop sharing.
Okay. Usman, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. As Usman said, this is our second meeting for the Collaborative Analytics Workstream. I still hear a lot of background noise. Just a reminder for everyone to go on mute, please. So today we have a number of points of our agenda. We're first going to start with an overview and updates. I know that we've had some new additions to this call, so I think it's instructive just to spend a couple of minutes to make sure we're all synced in terms of the mission of N3C and how we're organized. And hopefully we'll get some updates from others on the call on some of the other open questions. Last week we also had a demo from Palantir, which was very useful and enlightening in terms of what the platform provides. I know we were low on time, and so we didn't have the opportunity to address all questions. Reminder, please go on mute, everyone. Maybe Usman, you can identify who might be the
yeah, let me just
background offender and put them on mute. I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you now. Everything sounds good.
Perfect. So hopefully we have the folks from Palantir on the phone who will be able to provide some additional answers to questions that we have. Then we're going to hear from Chris Shute talk about ingestion harmonization, recognizing that upstream of all the work that we're going to be doing in this collaborative analytics effort depends on the data that's coming out of this group. So Chris is going to describe how they're operating and what we can expect. Then we'll turn to the formation of additional work streams. I think we all recognize that time is of the essence, and we need to be working in parallel as much as we can. This is a very large group of individuals who are on this call. I think we're over 70 now. So I think this call will be, for the most part, largely informational. And we really need subgroups that can be boots on the ground and get very important activities done. So we'll be talking about some of the additional formation of sub-work streams, and what they'll be doing. If time, we'll have a Leaf demo to describe a resource that we believe could be quite useful. This is just an example of one of many tools and resources that we know we need to incorporate eventually into to this cloud environment. But I think the Leaf platform is a great example of the kinds of tools that can help this group. So let's go forward with just a quick reminder of what N3C is. So we are an effort to create a row-level limited data set, limited in the technical jargon, meaning that there will be some PHI contained in this data set of COVID-19 patients and controls extracted from EHR systems. This is a partnership across the CTSA hubs and multiple clinical institutions, data sharing networks, and government agencies. We will be utilizing a FedRAMP compliant analytical environment, chiefly Palantir, that we'll be discussing more soon. This is a national resource that is complementary and synergistic with individual institutions. We realize that some other external efforts are doing a fabulous job, and we want to work with them and coordinate with them. And finally, this is a self-governed resource coordinated by NCATS and supported by CD2H. And by the way, I am a member of CD2H and one of the co-leads of this work stream with Peter Robinson. So what N3C is not, it's not a registry of all patients in the US. It is not a repository for all types of data, although I put some asterisks here because we recognize that there's other data modalities that can be very instrumental in the science and analysis of COVID. So there's already discussions about how we can link to other repositories and efforts underway, including imaging data and omics data. So there's already been some background discussions of how to successfully link information through the N3C data to these other data modalities. This is not, N3C is not owned by any one organization and is not meant to be a distributor of clinical data. Remind people that this is a data enclave where data will exist within this platform, and there's no intent to have data egress outside of this system. So we've organized ourselves according to 4 work streams. This is the overall N3C organization, not the analytics organization. We'll get to that shortly. But overall, we have 4 components or work streams, including a data partnership governance work stream focused on the data use agreement and IRB, and the instantiation of a data access committee. There's the phenotype and data acquisition work stream to define the inclusion-exclusion criteria and how to select patients for inclusion in this data effort. Data ingestion harmonization into a common data model, and Chris Shute, who's going to talk about that shortly. And then this work stream, which is the collaborative analytics, committed to building an analytical ecosystem in the cloud to support the research and analysis that we all know is desperately needed. Okay, so let's take a quick turn to some updates. I know, Melissa, maybe I might catch you a little unprepared here because I put this together at the last minute, but I believe here are some outstanding items that we'd like to hear about from NCATS and others, if you have answers ready. So the first is, I believe there's an N3C bulletin going out tomorrow, is that correct?
That is correct. And we essentially, the bulletin is meant to just sort of be an overarching update on the progress, and it will be sent to not only the N3, everybody who's onboarded to N3C, but also the CTSA informatics community, and as well as the CTSA hub. So basically anybody who's participating in any way in any of those communities will get a weekly mailer just to give them an update. For the, so that'll come out weekly. For the DUA and the IRB, I'm going to hand it off to Chris to give an update on the IRB, and then probably Ken on the DUA, because I know there's been some updates on that from the NIH side.
Yes, the IRB protocol was completed over the weekend. There are some straggling edits that may come in this afternoon. We did submit to the IRB, who did a preliminary review, and of course, being an IRB, they sent it back to us. So we have some time to put in some last-minute changes. But they also wanted the DUA to be stripped of the comments and edits. So we're going to send them a snapshot of the DUA so that the IRB can have a fair-minded view of what is intended. But I think it's fair to say that that process has begun, and we hope to have a review in a timely fashion.
Great, thanks, Chris. Ken, is there any information you'd like to provide for the NOC at this time, or should we, is that still under development? Is Ken on this call?
He should be here, but I can tell you on this morning's call with NCATS that it is not out yet and we're not allowed to talk about it, so you can move on.
Okay.
But information coming soon. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's kind of the information we want to know. So everyone understands we are very highly dependent on access to a cloud environment to make all this work, and we'll be talking more about Palantir shortly. We've built a list of access to this system, what we're calling the first wave. This will be a set of users across different work streams, just so we understand this environment, can begin to acquire training, documentation, and everything else we can learn, so we can begin to architect what the solution will provide. So that's been submitted to NCATS. Sam, if you're on the call, I don't know if you have any updates in terms of where we are with access to this first set of individuals. Sam,
hey, I don't know. I see Sam on the call right now. If he's not, then I can touch base. Mariam and I can touch base with him separately.
Okay, great. And I guess if there's any kind of other outstanding burning questions before we move to the rest of the agenda, this would be a good time to raise it, or at the very end of this call. Let's see, how would I know? People can put it in the chat perhaps, or can they?
I'm monitoring the chat, Justin, so there are no questions right now.
Okay, no, I guess you can also look to see if there's a raised hand.
The only other thing I might say, Justin, is just for, we've got quite a spectrum of different kinds of expertise on this call today, and I know we're going to kind of figure out how to subdivide ourselves in a bit, but everyone is going to be interacting with this portal. So we really want to hear requirements from all of you those different perspectives. So just have that in mind as we go through the rest of this.
Great, okay. So somewhat of a brief recap from last week where we talked about the Palantir system. And again, Palantir has been working with NIH and NCI and various institutes for over a year now to get FedRAMP certified, and different organizations have been successfully using them. So we also want to leverage all of that work and the expertise that now exists to expedite the development of our own N3C platform. And many of the advantages of using Palantir at this time are listed here, including the very robust security and auditing system, the ability to support many different tools, and ability to integrate many tools. But Palantir also has a very kind of deep stack and tool set itself that I think is going to be very useful, and its ability to interrupt with third-party solutions. So that's part of what we learned last week from their demo. I think this language is very useful for everyone to see in terms of what it means for Palantir to be a partner here. This is language I've received from NCATS, and I think this is what I remind everyone, that the data that's being provided to the system will be managed and owned by NCATS and not Palantir. Palantir is a technical agent, but at no time become the owner of any data or property of its customers. And all Palantir team members are cleared contractors at NIH and follow traditional protocols. So rest assured that Palantir will not be owning the outputs of this endeavor. Okay. So as I said, Palantir provides a lot of great sophisticated tools out of the box. And to Melissa's point, we absolutely need the community input in terms of what this collaborative environment is going to look like, what the use cases will be, what the science will be, and how we can support it. And so we're really looking to this to the many experts on this call who can provide us that critical feedback, not only feedback, but direct engagements in terms of the sub work streams that I'll be discussing shortly, and really helping flesh out what this platform can help us achieve, including desired functionality, the clinical questions and science that we believe can be addressed through the system, requirements for different tools and machine learning stacks, and as well as important governance structures. Okay, any questions of that before we move on? Okay, so we're now going to just address a few outstanding questions. I sent, by the way, I hope everyone on this call is part of the collaborative analytics Slack channel. I believe is called something like that. I think N3C Analytics is what it's called. So that's a great medium to interact. And I sent out a request earlier for questions for Palantir. I also provided a link to this demo for the demo from last week if you didn't have a chance to see that. So let's take a quick look at some of the questions, and we can have our Palantir collaborators answer them in real time. First question. Some of these might be a little technical. Hopefully we can kind of quickly get through it so we have time for all the other points. So first question is, what is the framework for writing and publishing microservices, and how are they shared for others to use? I think what this gets at is we're trying to build a collaborative environment So if people develop something in their workspace, how do they share it, and how does that become integrated into the broader fabric of this platform? So maybe there's a Palantir person who can help describe the right pattern for use here.
Hello. Yes, I'm Nabil Qureshi. We have a few of us here today. So my colleague Amin Manna is one of our kind of technical staff here, and will probably answer most of the questions. We also have Kelly Wilson on the call, who's a biologist at NCATS, and she can actually give you guys some kind of applied answers as to how NCATS is using the system at the moment, since I think that'll be a bit more effective than us kind of answering these in the abstract. If that sounds okay. So I guess for the microservices one, I'll give the mic to Amin.
Yeah, hi. So I think the answer here is twofold. It kind of depends on what kind of microservices we're thinking about here. And these kind of subdivide into two classes. So there's websites. And for websites, if we're building web applications or websites, we have the ability to build certain front-end web applications directly within Palantir. I'll share my screen to begin with just to show that. So this is an example of something that is built, that is being built at NCATS right now. And it's a web application that is entirely built within Palantir and continues to be hosted within Palantir and is accessible to users who have access to Palantir. So this is a way to build a web application pretty quickly using a sort of point and click drag and drop interface. This is actually a UI for curating chemical reactions. For websites that are a little bit more complex, or that you want to self-host, that are not built within the platform, or that need to be available to users who don't have access to the Palantir platform itself, then you kind of have options. There is a group at NCATS that is currently building a portal to access NCATS projects. And that would be a web application that is entirely self-hosted or hosted at NCATS. And we have the ability to whitelist it. And so that's an application that you build using whatever stack that you choose, and you hit Palantir APIs just to read and write data. So if you want to do that, that is also an option. Similarly, if you want to build website backend applications, it's the same process. If you can build a website backend or a web app backend that you believe is secure and that you're comfortable putting data in, then we can whitelist that, and it can make API calls to Foundry and vice versa. So an example of that is at NCATS, there is the NCATS Resolver service for resolving different compounds. And we regularly hit that API from within Foundry and from various front-end applications that are built within Foundry.
Yeah, I think
sorry,
quickly, just to jump in, the term microservice can denote a wide variety of things. So if the person who asked the question wants to be more specific, we can talk to that specifically as well.
I guess one thing that you demonstrated last week were these nodes that you can create as part of an ETL. Those themselves, I think, could be regarded as microservices, and you can publish those for others to use. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So any artifact in the system, whether it's a data set or an analysis or a workbook, etc., becomes one of those nodes and can be published to a broader audience, which you can select in a fairly granular way. So one way you could set it up is kind of like every team or every institution kind of has its own workspace. So you can kind of model this as a GitHub repo or something like that. And then you can share various things across teams or have shared repos as well.
Great, and I think that's very linked to the second question in terms of workspaces and projects and studies. So these are just different ways of scoping access and work products, right?
Sorry, I was on mute there. Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, I can show an example from NCATS if that's helpful to you, Justin.
Yeah, taking a quick look at that would be helpful.
All right, sounds good. Awesome. Is Kelly on the call?
Yes, this is Kelly. I'm here.
Hey, Kelly. I was wondering if you'd be able to chat quickly about how you guys organize the work in NCGC, for example.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so at NCATS, we primarily do a lot of compound screening. And so as part of that, a lot of our projects have external collaborators, some of which are within NIH and others are outside of the NIH. But essentially, sort of the area that Nabil's in right now is just sort of think of it as just like a folder, similar to a folder system that is on, your own personal computer. But for particular groups, we have folders for each group. And then within that group's folders, you can have subfolders for various projects, and you can individually grant permissions to all of the items within that folder to specific individuals like Nabil is doing here. But you also can do a large group of people. And there also are sort of like built-in sort of default permissions. So for example, this folder is designated as an NCATS access folder. So any user in Palantir that is an NCATS user, they can access the data in this folder. However, there are lots of collaborations we have with NCI, for example. And Nabil, I don't know if you want to look up like an NCI researcher, but
Yeah.
essentially, because we have a lot of collaborations with NCI with specific researchers, obviously there are some data sets that NCATS has decided to sort of make public to everyone at NCI. And so NCI is obviously focused on cancer research. So we recently released a data set to NCI researchers of about 4 years of screening data against over 200 cancer cell lines of a very, very large library of compounds. So this data set that Nabil is in is called NCI single drug responses. So each row in this data set is actually a dose response curve for a single compound against a single cell line. But this data set is quite large. I think it's showing there it's 1.1 million rows. So this is a lot of data. But this data is just a slice of the full data set right above it called single drug responses. This is all of the screening data at NCATS. And so with a fairly simple setup, with sort of my direction of which projects or which screening data should go into that shared data set, essentially there's row level permissions that says that people at NCI should be able to view only these particular rows of this much larger NCAT screening data set. So that's how it works. And then there are additional, folders for individual projects. Let's say that, some NCATS researcher has a direct NCI collaborator. They want to share some analysis with them. There are folders specific for that. But those folders, Nabil sort of is a power user, so he sort of has access to everything. But as you can see, there are various folders that if you're at NCI, you cannot view or access because you're not an NCI user. But if you're at NCATS, you can view those folders and vice versa. So it's a really nice way that you can sort of explicitly share data with those who you want to share it with and not share data with those who you don't want to share it with.
Great, that's really helpful. Some of the other questions relate to how configurable it is by different users and integration with third-party tools. For example, the ability to install your own packages and libraries, as well as different environments like RStudio and Jupyter Notebooks. I know you described the ability to integrate with those services before, but without getting into the details of what that actually means to have a Jupyter Notebook, for example, instantiated in your environment and how that might integrate into your services.
Yeah, so quick answer. So this depends partially on the data use agreement thing. So just to be super clear, so we have this interface within the platform which pretty much has all the functionality of a notebook. It's more node based, so every node here is kind of a slice of code, and you can think of it as the cells in a notebook, and those resolve to a table. So every node here is a combination of code and then its output data set, or the state of the data at that point in the acyclic graph. So all of that has the languages that you would all be using on a regular basis, Python, R, etc. Now, at other places, the software has the capability of interoperating with external tooling that the customer is using. So if somebody wants to move data out of this into a kind of Python notebook environment and work there, or if they want to work with SAS or RStudio or whatever it is, we have done this in the past. It's very easy. They simply kind of query the unique blob that you can see here in the URL bar. The thing that we need to work out with you guys, though, is how does that work with data export? So if, in this case, NCATS is sort of mandating that the data stays within the platform, then the work will probably have to be carried out in here, and then we'll have to work out something whereby the code is exported to GitHub, which we've already discussed, and I showed the kind of export options before. But that would restrict some of the tooling that can be used, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I was imagining is that this would be hosted within the the virtual private cloud instance, so that's shared by Palantir. So that becomes the way in which all data is kind of within the same system and can have the same level of auditing and tracking. But to the extent that can be done, it sounds like it's not kind of native to Palantir. That you'd have to put there'd have to be some other way to audit and secure that platform. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's related to the packages question. So with the packages, it's like users can autonomously manage their own Conda environments, including installing packages from public Conda channels. But typically, like we would allow people to install any package that's open source. But in this kind of FedRAMP secure environment, there's a process whereby you say, okay, we'd like these packages that aren't in the public Conda channels. We then go agree that with NIH and make sure that's kosher, and then we get that on the platform for you. So there's just a few extra kind of controls here that wouldn't be the case normally, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. I think the other questions are all related, and you probably don't need to discuss them. Is there any questions from the group? If you want to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Okay, so here's a question. Once the project is live, will there be recorded trainings available for our researchers? Johanna Lumba. I think this a question for NCATS.
I can take it quickly. So we typically take a pretty multi-channel approach to training. So what we would probably do is offer several trainings a week where people can kind of dial in via Zoom and just kind of take a training on whatever basis they want. There's a bunch of kind of trainings inside the platform. There's pre-recorded videos that we can make available to people as well. And I think we can go from there. But yeah, we're kind of, we're going to make everything available to you guys, including the pre-recorded videos and live sessions. So if there's a need to configure kind of other modes of training as well, we can support that for sure. There's also plentiful tutorials and documentation inside the actual platform itself.
Great. Okay. I'm trying to share my screen again, 1 second.
Okay, Justin, I think there's another question.
Yeah, it's from Jeremy Harper. It doesn't seem as powerful as direct access to the supercomputers that most recite. Are we pursuing some mixed modalities for this type of resources? And so I think, Jeremy, this gets to the heart of how we're structuring the governance, which is that we're building a data enclave where everything goes to a single hosted site and everything is managed within that environment. And I think is the prior work that's been done with Palantir in terms of getting FedRAMP secure, that we would be using that, but perhaps other supercomputer environments, I agree, could provide similar functionality, but the Palantir stack seems to be a very useful one.
One thing to add there quickly, Justin, is that we do have the platform is plugged into various computing resources that are external to the platform at NIH itself. So NCI specifically, there's what's called the BioWolf supercomputing cluster. And there's also something called DNE. There's also DNA Nexus. So for a lot of compute intensive type stuff, we actually do interoperate with NIH resources. So this is obviously an NIH question, but I'm sure they'd be willing to make that kind of stuff available to the CD2H project if necessary as well.
Okay, so let's move forward. We'll continue to acquire questions. Maybe we'll be able to revisit them by the end of this call, or separately follow up from NCATS and Palantir. So I'd now like to move to the description of the data ingestion harmonization work stream that's being led by Chris Shute.
Yeah, if you could let me share, I think I have a bigger copy of this.
Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing. You can.
Thank you. There, you should be seeing, I apologize, it's not a rectangular shape, but nevertheless, it should fit more or less on your screen. This is a revision and an update of what we spent virtually our entire meeting last Friday evening going over. So for those of you that heard that, there's not a lot of new material here. It's been modestly updated, as I said. So I'll go over it very briefly. As you can see, this is really the second part of a stream. We're assuming, if you can see my pointer, Justin, can they see my pointer when I'm? No
yeah, I can see it.
Yep. Yes, we can.
Yeah. So in this upper left corner, we are accepting data that is coming from sites in one of four models: Picornet, ACT, OMOP, or Trinetics. And there's been an extraction process and a phenotyping process and a description process that occurs in a previous work stream. So we're picking this up quite literally midstream. When the ingestion and harmonization community gets this, it will go onto the platform in a secure partition, not in Palantir, but in an NCAT secure partition, where we'll do site ingestion, Adeptia, this is Adeptia, there's no V, Adeptia mapping, secondary staging, and then merge and export. And you can see at each stage we have intake, alignment, quality checks, and output. So we, Devera Gabriel, bless her soul, kind of set this up as a very elegant grid from the protocols that we have established. So as soon as we get the data in, we will conduct the quality measures that are native to those particular data models. Each has, we're going to format for missingness and missing values, check the value sets, and of course the common data model specific data quality checks. At that point, we'll iterate with the sites to try to correct these problems at this stage. But when we have an adequate quality control of an ingestion, we'll move it on to the extraction, transform, and load. We're using, as I said, the Adeptia tool, where we take the common data model, typically in a data model format, a database format, use the standard maps that are being created as we speak and have been created by CD2H and other parties since we began, from a data model to a data model. Our target model will be OMOP 5.3.1. So we will, through the Adeptia tool, map from the ingested common data model form for each site to an OMOP 5.3.1 version for each site, and then ensure that we didn't introduce errors in the transform. It may be that there are idiosyncratic variables that were not checked or identified in the green bar that we encounter in this red bar that cause systematic problems in the transformation. In any event, we'll look for that. The Adeptia tool has its own data quality metrics and measures that we will take advantage of, and then do a systematic transform into OMOP 5.3. From that point, we'll take the OMOP 5.3 database version, again site-specific, and use the OMOP Odyssey data quality measures. We'll create the dashboards, we'll create the data quality measures. We won't necessarily iterate with the site at this point, but we will return the harmonized dashboard data and the contributing site quality dashboard indicators with an expectation that we can catch this on the next round. We do expect a refresh rate, ideally 2 to 3 times a week, but quite frankly, as often as we can take it, or as often as they can provide it, rather. And from which we hope to have a validated 5.3.1 OMOP instance of a particular site's contributed data. We then go down to merge and export. Each of the many OMOP data sets will be merged into an overarching OMOP data set. We will preserve an anonymized identifier for site, so you'll be able to tell that it's from site A or site B, but no more than that. And just to remind us all, this is a limited data set. It will contain real date information, and it will contain real zip code information as a proxy for geocode, which is why we are managing this in a data enclave, as Justin had outlined. We'll do post-merge checks, of course, post-merge cleansing, and then export this, this unified or merged OMOP data set onto the Palantir platform, where it will be accessible to the data analytic community. This process will be repeated as we get refreshes and updates, and that the merged data set will in fact reflect additions, new cases, subsequent data, outcomes, additional information as we get it. Presently, we are planning an update model as opposed to a refresh model. We may revisit that if it's too logistically awkward, but we are hoping that sites will send us new data from site ingestion that we would add to this process over time. I think that's the 50,000-foot view, Justin.
Because when you say update versus refresh, does this mean you're basically just overwriting everything every time?
A refresh would be overwriting everything. I'm using update as in an additive concatenating kind of way. We plan to do the update concatenating kind of addition unless it is logistically impractical, in which case we might resort to a complete refresh with each submission, but that's going to play all kinds of difficulty with data versioning and other related challenges.
And Chris, this is Ken. I'm sorry, I was on a call with the data use agreement, which supposedly would come back from the NIH tomorrow, in case anybody's interested. On that question, on what you and Justin just are discussing, I was assuming, this is going to have to be a long discussion. I was assuming that there was a unique identifier, patient ID, that we would concatenate with, which means that the sites would have to pull and maintain that ID.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
And we put that in the protocol. I'm sure you've all read the protocol with great detail. We talk, and thank you, I forget his first name, but the good Dr. Maestri sent a hash algorithm via Slack that we are invoking. And it is essentially a name, date of birth, gender, I believe, and then of course a secret seed with the standard public hash algorithms to generate an identifier. And the point of this identifier is to support a downstream linkage to other data sets as they might contain related information. For example, imaging data sets or RNA sequence data sets of the virus. If we can link them to phenotype, that would be extraordinary. And the mechanism for that linkage would be through this hashed identifier. It's supposed to be resistant to brute force attacks of just using those variables to generate an equivalent hash by virtue of the seed that would remain secret and would only be shared with those organizations with whom we have a data use agreement to foster data linkage.
And Chris, I think this is relevant to a question that was just put in the chat. Actually, I don't know if it was a question or just a statement. It says, any deduplication of patient action is planned for systems with overlap in their population, for example, the New York City systems. So
Yes, and we're hoping. I know there's some discussions of the New York's community contributing as an aggregate, but that's still in discussion. We will not have complete deduplication capability. We'll have approximated deduplication capability by virtue of these generated hashes. So to the extent that two people have the same hash, there's a high probability that they're the same person, but not it's not 100% true. It is plausible that people could have the same names, the same birth dates, and the same genders, and would generate an equivalent hash.
So Chris, I think many of the outputs that are happening in each of these stages would be relevant to some of the portal and dashboarding efforts outlined in this group. To what extent can information there be shared and published in the analytic framework?
Yeah, I'll have to look at that chat. I'm not sure which information they're referring to. Who's that from?
I'm sorry, that was my own question in terms of data quality metrics. If you're doing that, we might want to publish that for others to consume as they're thinking about their analytics.
Quite right. We will export the full Odyssey data quality metrics to the Palantir environment. Arguably, they could be recreated on the Palantir environment, but there's no need to do so. We will definitely include the quality metrics of the overall merged OMOP data set in the Palantir environment. However, we will not include the clinical data model specific quality check reports that we make on a site-by-site basis. Those we will only share with the contributing sites to the extent that they can facilitate improved data accuracy and completeness from those sites.
Okay, and I think that actually was related to a question from Parsa. Let me just make sure this says, will the DQA process and site ingestion phase be shared with upstream systems a priori so they can qualify the data before submission?
Of course. Yes. These are all public data quality checks with the exception of the Adeptia quality check, which we will publish as we develop it. But these are not secret or proprietary data quality mechanisms. As I said, we will use the data quality checks that are intrinsic to the common data models that are contributing. ACT, all data quality measures and key
will or so uh, and uh,
That
Or